In the opening scene, two friends arrive on a mysterious-looking island, hoping to find a lost treasure. There is nothing. Lives there. The friends slowly make their way to the island when suddenly it starts moving. To their horror, the island trained by someone or something. Following this, the movie cuts to some weeks in the past. At midnight, a majestic creating a trail of luminous light behind it. The next morning, an old farmer summons his 3 sons to display the sorry sight of destroyed. The man orders his sons to keep watch at night, hoping to catch the culprit behind it. The brothers then of the dark, and he knows that the task at hand is immense, but to gain his father's trust, he agrees. He notices the silhouette of the mare and quickly throws a rope in its direction. Suddenly, the rope tightens skies, from where he can see the beautiful village. John is mesmerized by the view, and he begins, but his happy time soon comes to an end when the mare crashes and they both end up in a bog. John manages to get him drowning. John forgets his mission and instead tries to help it. He tries pulling the giant mare out by himself, but the beast doesn't even budge. So he powers up a nearby wheat mill and eventually rescues it. The mare findings, making it promise that it will no longer trample their fields. After the mare departs, John looks upon the dusk royal horses as he takes in the sight of these creatures. He suddenly hears a voice in the background, which, acting quickly, he grabs a pitchfork and attempts to defend himself. But when he approaches the source of the noise, John is a small, humpbacked, magic foal. He can miraculously speak, just like a human. Foal informs upon seeing the state of the destroyed wheat field, causing John to panic. Sensing the problematic situation swiftly, carrying John on his back as they race away from the field with great speed. Along the way, John expresses his desire to sell the horses to acquire some much-needed funds. Foal once again agrees to help and lets out a piercing whistle so he could capture them. Now, with the majestic horses in tow, the group sets off on a journey to the bustling market town. Upon arriving there, John is bombarded with offers from eager buyers, vying for the chance to own the regal horses, and is revealed to be none other than the king. As John walks near the grand palace, the king orders his men to capture them, saying a poor farmer like John could have never bought the horses by himself. Feeling John turns to Foal for help. The latter once again lets out a whistle, summoning the horses back to John's side, but in the process, he keeps his composure in front of the gathered public. John then proposes a trade, requesting 2 silver running back to John. Taking this into account, the king offers him the prestigious role of the most important groom in the opportunity, so he accepts without thinking twice. And because of the announcement, the entire crowd also starts to gain more and more popularity among the people. The king becomes increasingly jealous of him and seeks to find a way but one day, his courtier gives him an idea. According to his plan, he has to send a tale, and this can be used as a reason to execute him. Hearing this, the king starts laughing maniacally and Elsewhere, when John learns about the mission, he becomes determined to complete it. Firebird has never been tamed by anyone, and this might prove to be an impractical task. But John is determined to collect some dream nuts to lure the Firebird. John is curious and wants to try the nuts.
But I want dream nuts.
But Foal forbids him from eating them, warning him that they act as a sedative. Following this, they Firebird. There, they see a warning about the presence of liquid sand. Regardless, John throws the dream out. The majestic bird emerges from the ground and begins munching on those nuts. According to the plan, to attack. John and Foal are almost killed on many occasions, but they always come to the rescue of one another. But in the end, the nuts finally knock out the Firebird, allowing John to capture it, with Foal find the Firebird looking weak and shedding a fiery tear. Foal explains that the bird can only be hot when it is its energy. Hearing this, John feels pity for the bird, so he decides to free it. As soon as he takes the chains into the skies, but not before leaving a fire feather for John. Now that the mission has failed, Foal suggests him, as it may result in John's execution. However, our brave but stubborn protagonist is sure the Firebird. Upon their return, the king orders their execution. As expected, John tries to prove him, explaining that he caught the bird but then set it free out of compassion. However, the king refuses to believe his story, and right then, the majestic Firebird appears, casting a bright light over the kingdom. It heard John's now arrived to return the favor. The people are baffled when they notice the Firebird following John's orders, hence John to live, and also throws a feast in his honor. That night, John is celebrated as a hero in the kingdom. negated by his courtier to send John on an impossible task to retrieve the King Maiden, who resides in an iron rock. The king is convinced that John will fail, and thereby he will have a reason to execute him. So, Messenger announces the king's new assignment to John, who accepts the challenge without any hesitation. After scaling the treacherous high rock mountains, John and Foal finally arrive at the entrance of the palace where the King Maiden resides, making it impossible to enter. But with the help of the feather gifted by the Firebird, John is able to melt down, causing a ton of water to gush out. Unfortunately, this freezes Foal in a ball of ice, sending him tumbling. Is a bad one, but he manages to survive without any injuries. Meanwhile, John enters the palace where he comes across the Empress. He introduces himself to be a matchmaker sent by the king, but the Empress tells him that she has no interest in marrying, as there are no heroes left. To test his bravery, she jumps off a cliff. In courage, the Empress deploys her gown as a parachute and starts descending slowly. But just then, John accidentally dies a painful death, but Foal shows up with a pair of new wings and rescues both of them. Later that night, the forest, before continuing their journey back to the kingdom. During this time, Foal advises John to abandon the Empress, is flustered by John's loyalty. The next morning, the trio arrive at the kingdom, where John is greeted with a hero, which only fuels the king's growing resentment towards him. Despite this, the king is compelled to reward him, Empress, and decides to visit her. He takes some flowers and climbs up to her window, but their reunion is cut short. Meets the king and gets displeased to learn that he's the age of her father. Outside, John becomes jealous upon she is reluctant. In order to delay it, she mentions that it was lost in the ocean. Hearing this, the king becomes enraged, and so he sends John on yet another impossible. Same night, as Foal ponders John's erratic behavior, he sees the spirit of a whale soaring through the turned into an island. In the early hours of the day, John and Foal set off on a journey to the whalefish, only to put in this state by some sailors as a punishment. Her crime? She devoured several ships for fun. She was young and naive, but now she regrets her actions. Soon after, the whale sheds a tear, which gives John to make her sneeze and break free from the chains. So, they ride into the whale's nostrils and tickle its interior with the tip of Foal's feathers. The plan works, and the large mammal starts struggling to itch itself. The whale then rewards John and Foal the precious ring as a gesture of thanks. In the next scene, the two make their way back, go unnoticed, as guards and a courtier spot them through a scope and rush to capture John. The commotion weighs into the bedchamber and arrest John, falsely accusing him of kidnapping the King Maiden. After this, the king gets ready to, but in order to buy more time, she demands that he rejuvenate himself through a recipe passed down from her grandmother. Cauldrons, one filled with boiling water, the second with ice water, and the third with boiling milk. Sensing that it may be a trap, a courtier advises the king to test the cauldrons on John before subjecting himself. He knows how to nullify the effect of the boiling contents. She reveals that throwing her grandmother's ring in the first cauldron, the flower of life and death that grows at the end of the world in the third cauldron, will cancel out the deadly effects. She claims that John's survival hinges on their success in executing this plan. Foal, who is injured by the gunshot in his demise, but for the sake of his best friend, he sets out to find the flower. Since he cannot fly anymore, he will be awaiting death. Despite the ominous warning, Foal plucks the flower to save John. In the morning, the king him to jump into the cauldrons. The latter believes that he is about to die, so he bravely professes his love. The Empress successfully throws the ring into the first cauldron, helping John emerge unharmed. In the second cauldron, the fire is a feather, keeping John safe once again. Meanwhile, Foal manages to deliver the flower just in time for John to be saved. In the John appears before the Empress, who is amazed at his transformation. The king is also shocked is that the recipe actually makes people younger, so he jumps into the first cauldron. But as soon as he does so, a huge bubble emerges and carries him away inside of it. The people of the kingdom only laugh at his misfortune. He's an asshole! Throw him in the milk! Meanwhile, the Empress and John notice that Foal is missing, so they start sitting patiently, waiting for his death, as he had plucked the flower. However, the Empress reveals that the flowers assess the bravery of the person who picked it. She could have told him that before he left. She also clears that if Foal had not, he would actually have died, but now he won't. Hearing this, Foal delightfully gets up and hugs. Scene, the crowd cheers for John, demanding that he become the new king. He happily accepts and vows. The movie ends as John and the Empress finally get married and take over the kingdom as the newly crowned king and queen. Subscribe for more videos like this.